Therefore, there are some that thought they would stand up against it. One of those people represents a coalition of interested folks that believe so deeply in democracy that they are not only standing up, but they're speaking out. Joining me now to talk about this important issue is Michael Steinberg. Michael has served as the legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Michigan since 1997 and is responsible for overseeing all litigation taken on by the ACLU throughout the state. Since joining the staff of the ACLU, I want you to listen to this loud and clear. Michael has worked on numerous high-impact, high-profile cases on issues that involve civil liberties, freedom of speech and expression, post-9/11 issues, religious freedom, racial justice, LGBT rights, police misconduct, women's rights, reproductive freedom, voting rights, and the list goes on. And I welcome back to First Shift Michael Steinberg. Michael, it's nice to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. You know, this is this just a simple checkbox on a form? Are we making much ado about nothing, Michael?
Well, what we're saying here is the Secretary of State is not above the law. In July, Governor Snyder vetoed this bill that would have required a citizenship checkbox on the ballot application. He vetoed it because it caused confusion. It actually prevented people who, of course, are citizens from voting in the primary. And what we're saying is it's unnecessary, it's duplicative, and it causes confusion, and it's going to delay people from voting in November. It can cause confusion, slow down the lines, and the Secretary of State simply does not have authority to unilaterally require something in addition to requirements provided by law as a condition of voting.
Well, you know, Michael, it seems to me that in fairness to democracy, which I think ultimately is what we're talking about here, we need to be careful. You know, earlier on in the show, I had a gentleman on from the state of Florida. They're doing a statewide rally in Florida this Saturday. As you know, they have been tremendously stressed and have seen a radical decrease in voter registration because of the suppression that has been going on there. I know that you're intimately familiar with what's happening in Pennsylvania and other states. And you're right. Our governor, in a rare case of clarity, literally sided with the voters, although I was and I'm still concerned because he said that if the right legislation came back to him, he would, quote unquote, consider it. But the Secretary of State does not have veto power over a governor, and this is really very far-reaching, in my opinion.
It is. You know, for years the Secretary of State's office has implemented various rules without going through the proper process. If a Secretary of State is to engage in rulemaking, there's this thing called the Administrative Procedures Act that says she has to publish the proposed rules, allow for comment, have hearings before she implements it, and she's just thumbed her nose at that process, and she thumbed the nose at the governor and the electorate this time.
Well, the governor has been, at least to my knowledge, been absolutely quiet on Ruth Johnson. And am I seeing that right, or am I just not seeing his response?
Yes, he has, and I want to stress that. You know, we all agree, everybody, that you must be a citizen to vote. But you cannot register to vote in the first place without being a citizen. So to have this additional requirement, an additional step to vote is unnecessary, and it's causing confusion. We hope that our litigation will be successful. The ballot is so long this time. There's 6 statewide ballot initiatives. There's the Supreme Court. We don't need any more confusion to slow down the lines.
Michael Steinberg, no question, all of that's true. A couple things that come to mind. I could actually keep you for 3 hours. There's so much about this that just has my head spinning. But when we stop and take a look at what you just said, one of the things you just said really just kind of clarifies this for me. If the problem is at your point of registration, and clearly the majority of people register to vote at the Secretary of State's office, isn't this a problem that can be corrected literally in her own purview? I mean, she certainly has a way to train these people and to implement policy in her own offices. Shouldn't the solution start there?
Precisely. There are, and it is true, there are a handful of individuals who are permanent residents and not citizens who, when they go to get a driver's license, are signed up as a registered voter. And the reason for that happening is not because the green card holder intends to register to vote. It's because Secretary of State employees across the state are not well trained and sometimes sign people up. Now, they absolutely know that these individuals are not citizens because when they present their green card to get a driver's license, it's pretty clear. But the training has not been good, and inadvertently, individuals find themselves registered to vote. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to vote. In fact, the ACLU represented a graduate student at Western Michigan University a number of years back who, when she went to get her driver's license, unbeknownst to her, she was signed up as a registered voter. And when she went to get to become a naturalized citizen, the immigration officials said, "You can't do this because you lied. You tried to become a registered voter when you weren't a citizen," and they tried to deport her. We stepped in and showed that this was not the problem of the individual graduate student, but the Secretary of State's office. And, you know, she needs to do a lot more to prevent this from happening, and it can be done very easily by educating her own employees.
Well, you know, that certainly would take care of the problem. I guess, Michael, at some level, what really bothers me about all this is that when the solution is simple, and there's nothing complicated about this, it's about training your own employees properly. And I'm not putting this on them at all. They just weren't properly trained. When the solution is this simple, yet you try to complicate it. We talked about confusion. Look what happened on August 7th. Michael, we weren't 2 hours into the show on August 7th, and people were calling the show telling us they were having issues. And this shouldn't be happening.
There was a tremendous amount of confusion at the polls during the primary. And voters were treated differently depending on where they were voting. Some people knew that the Secretary of State did not have authority and refused, based on principle, refused to check this checkbox. And some of them were forbidden from voting. Others were allowed to vote. Eventually, midway through the primary, the Secretary of State's office issued guidance saying that people should not be prevented from voting, but rather should be read some statement saying that it's a felony to vote if you're not a citizen. But that didn't get out, and there was a tremendous amount of confusion. And that was just the primary. You know, there aren't a lot of people relative to the general election who vote in the primary. But, you know, as we saw 4 years ago, the lines were very, very long and at the presidential election. And if the same thing happens on November 6th, it's going to slow down the lines, deter people from hanging in there and exercising the right.
And as you already mentioned, the ballot's longer this year. In fact, in Wayne and Kent counties, it's going to be 2 separate pieces of paper instead of front and back. It's going to be that and more. So Very quickly, we're almost out of time, Michael. Let me ask you, there are some city clerks, Carmela Sabal comes to mind, we had her on the show, that are refusing to follow the Secretary of State's admonition that they include the check box. Are they legally safe?
Well, we believe so, and we are representing several local clerks who are siding with the governor and saying that this checkbox is not authorized. But this is further proof of how unevenly this requirement is going to be applied throughout the state. And if we learned anything from Bush versus Gore, what you have to do to vote should be the same throughout the state.
Absolutely. Michael, I want to thank you so much. Michael Steinberg, the